Hey, hello, how do you do? Shady Doorags here. Next up to review is the episode in Blackest Night, a two-parter in which, from the title, you can tell it's going to be a Green Lantern episode. The Green Lantern Corps has always been one of my favorite series in DC Comics, so as a kid, this is one of my favorite episodes. But does it still hold up? Well, let's take a look. Part 1 starts on Earth, where a group of aliens are preparing for a trial. These robot creatures, called the Manhunters, are told to seek out John Stewart. Then we cut to the intro. After the intro, we get to John walking around his hometown incognito. He stops a crime and begins talking to his old teacher. Believe it or not, this isn't to keep his secret identity. John, both in this series and in the comics, is fine with the public knowing who he is. He sees being a Green Lantern as just another military position. I say another because he used to be in the Marines. The point of this scene is to give the sense that John is saying his goodbyes.
Well, Chris can give you some pointers. He's my grandson.
Grandson?
You've been away a long time, John.
Maybe too long.
This is where I noticed my first complaint of the episode. The sense of levity here can be easily missed, and that's because while this is a Green Lantern-focused episode, we've only had one adventure with these characters so far. John, and in extension the show, has not earned this type of episode. We don't know enough about his character to be shocked at the things we're supposed to be shocked at. Meanwhile, at the Hall of Justice, Jean, the Flash, and Hawkgirl are chillaxing.
Back on Thanagar, you were a cop, huh?
Detective.
What's it like there?
The same as anywhere, I suppose. There are criminals and we catch them.
And what about when you're not catching criminals? When you're not at work?
What about it?
Well, is there a Hawk Boy?
Hawkgirl walks away without answering that question, which is actually very clever writing. The audience might pass it off as her not being easy or her just not being interested, but later episodes will reveal that she has a reason for not answering Flash. Normally, I don't like to credit writers for things that haven't happened yet, but Justice League is one of those shows that created a continuity before creating the show in what the writers call the Bible. So anytime continuity works or doesn't work, be it with past or future episodes, it's fair game to both criticize and or praise. The Manhunters we saw earlier fly towards Earth, catching the attention of the Justice League, whose job is to, stop this kind of stuff from happening.
Wonder Woman is on another case. Superman's dealing with an earthquake, and Batman would only say that he's busy.
Typical.
This sets us up for a common trait of the show that not all team-based cartoons will do. It is very common for this show not to include all of its cast. This, to me, was a good call. In regards to continuity of DC and superhero worlds in general, superheroes are very busy people. They can't respond to every cry for help, including their own team members.
What in the world?
Did Gumball take inspiration from... No, it must be a coincidence.
What do you want here?
John Stewart, the Green Lantern.
What for?
That's not your concern.
Then it's war! So this fight happens. Things explode and the Justice League pretty much suck. I get that it's supposed to make the Manhunters feel formidable, but it really just makes the League look bad. Eventually the Man of Steel shows up, but even he starts to get taken down. Holy the dongles, they took down Superman! Surely these must be the fiercest of foes. This fight seems pretty reckless given the League's want to protect, but I'll chalk that up to them being shaky from the last aliens they fought. If you're trying to save the world, a few exploded cars aren't that big of a deal. Green Lantern finally shows up, and the League thinks he's there to help, but John winds up surrendering to the aliens and tells the others to stay out of it, not really giving a good explanation as to why. I want to complain about this because John should have known his friends weren't just gonna sit back. But this is a very in-character thing for him to do. In the comics, John has had to make some pretty big choices and usually martyrs himself while denying help from others. GL is brought to an alien planet where everyone seems to hate him. We get a glimpse of the Guardians of the Universe, a very important part of any Green Lantern story. Well, almost any.
I don't need to tell you how much we've gained because of the Corps' diversity, but sometimes it forces us to make sacrifices.
This moment is weird because it's showing the Guardians debating whether or not they want to help John, kind of making them seem like emotionless jerks. Which is what they are, don't get me wrong, but later they do wind up trying to help him without anyone needing to persuade them. This part is supposed to be foreshadowing, but it seems pretty pointless. It would have been more effective had the Guardians just showed up at the trial, or if they had showed the Guardians here but had them be silent. After that, we get a scene with some other Green Lanterns. I recognize a few of these guys. Kilowog has a reputation as the trainer of Lanterns. He's always seen as one of the best, so it's poignant that he doesn't badmouth John at all throughout this episode. However, this freaking mutated Pac-Man down here, I don't even know his name, but every time I see this Lantern in any show or movie, he's either getting beaten up or killed. Got to be one of the sorriest Lanterns in the Corps.
Good to see you.
I wish I could say the same, Stewart.
You're a disgrace to the Corps.
Get me out of here.
Of all the things that have happened, this is what gets John to show a reaction. He might believe that he's getting what he deserves, but deep down, John didn't want his friends to give up on him.
Hey! Stupid robot.
No, not yet.
Well, I'm sure that won't come back to the plot later. The episode continues to build up John's trial, really hammering it in that he did something terrible. Meanwhile, at the Hall of Justice, again, Jean uses his cheat powers to find Green Lantern. Who wants a character-driven dialogue scene?
John's a strange one, that's for sure.
I'm beginning to think all you humans are. Sorry.
It's all right. I take it as a compliment.
So the Link makes it to the alien planet, but are immediately attacked. Superman insists that they end things in a non-lethal manner. Hawkgirl doesn't exactly do that.
Hawkgirl!
What? Oh, that.
Am I angry at her for this? No, I'm not. As she said in the last episode, she's a product of her environment. Like John not telling his friends what's going on, this is just a result of her personality. Unlike John, however, Shiera immediately realizes what she did wrong and regrets it. By the end of this show, this girl will arguably wind up with the most development. The League eventually makes their way to the courtroom and realize what's going on. Superman apologizes for disrupting, explains the situation to the judges, and the League takes their seats. The trial begins and a pirate, Ken Jarreau, tells of how, while trying to stop him from pirating, John accidentally blew up a planet with 3 billion people on it. During the recess, the League thinks John is trying to clear his name, but John says that's completely untrue and that he only came back to face his punishment. And this is where the first part ends. This is also where my sighing begins. I feel the situation is way too simplified. John fired off a weapon while in the line of duty, and as a result, innocent people died. Whether or not I personally believe what John did is right or wrong isn't the big issue here. The big issue is that the episode outright says he's wrong and should be punished for it. And to that I ask, well, what was he supposed to do then? Was he supposed to just not fight the pirates? The only way evil men thrive is for good men to do nothing. Hindsight is 20/20. Some other wise saying that people say because rule of 3. I'm not trying to say John shouldn't face any consequences for his actions, but it upsets me how black and white they're painting this story. Depending on your own morality, the law, and the lawyer you get, John might be found guilty or innocent here. Part 2 starts with Superman saying he doesn't believe what's happening. He asks Flash and Hawkgirl to stall while he and Jean go check something out.
John admits he's guilty. No one's disputing the facts.
Maybe I am.
So what do you expect to find on this moon?
I don't know. There's something bothering me. Just call it
An intuition?
exactly.
We'll come back to that later. Back in the trial, John says he doesn't intend to defend himself. Because of that, the Flash intervenes and says he'll act as John's lawyer. This might have been an awesome moment to display the grayness of the situation, especially considering the show decides to eventually make Wally a forensic scientist. Not to mention, they have Hawkgirl over there, who is a cop. But instead, it's just used to make Flash look like a joke. Shiera realizes that the other Lanterns aren't at the trial and goes to confront them, saying they should stand up for their friend. When the Lanterns badmouth John, she calls them cowards, the biggest insult you can give a Green Lantern, and starts fighting them. This does not make sense to me. How are they cowards? John himself thinks he's guilty. I can see that they thought he was innocent, but they believe he's guilty too. Also, the fighting here just perplexes me. I understand that this is how some people solve their problems, but I've never seen the point of someone suddenly lashing out against people who disagree with them, as if winning the fight will make them correct. The bartender asks that they don't use weapons, to which everyone agrees. Shayera proceeds to wreck all the lanterns, save Kilowog, who actually agrees with her. This is where my knowledge of comic books comes back to bite me. In comics, before they're given their badges, Green Lanterns go through military training where they aren't allowed to use their rings. Similar to real-life military practices, it's supposed to desensitize them so that when in combat, they never waver. This is supposed to be some of the best training in the universe. Watching Shayera completely destroy multiple Green Lanterns just doesn't feel right. Does that bring down the episode? Not necessarily. Just because something is different from the source material doesn't mean it's automatically worse. If you don't know anything about Green Lanterns, like the episode should assume you don't, then you can believe a police officer from a world consumed by violence can defeat a few space cops who use fancy rings all the time. Still, this fight, as well as the one with the Manhunters earlier, feels more like it was designed to give the viewers their episode's worth of violence rather than adding much to the plot or character. Flash continues to cringingly stall, and thank goodness the judges call him out on it. Kilowog enters to be a character witness. Meanwhile, at the site of the explosion, Superman and Jean realize something.
It can't be.
But it is. This moon is still orbiting a planet which doesn't exist.
It should have flown off into space the moment the planet was destroyed.
See, I have a problem with this. Earlier, Superman said it was his intuition that made him question everything, which is pretty lazy writing. But here, the writers give a clear physical reason to have the characters question the circumstances. And Superman has supervision. He could have seen this from far away. When Jean asked him why he wanted to go to the moon, he could have just said something vague like, something's not adding up, or I want to make sure of something before I get anyone's hopes up. Instead, just intuition? I went over this in my The Problem with the Power of Friendship video. However, it's slightly different here. Superman isn't getting power from an abstract concept. He just believes something to be true without any evidence backing it up, and it turns out that it was. This little trait is called faith, and it's often not good for writing a fictional story. One response I often get to this is, but this can happen because one time I had faith in blah 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 and it came true. It's not that faith doesn't work in real life, but that for a fictional story, it's a cop-out. To say something happened because a character believed it would makes it hard for any tension to come about in the story. Don't get me wrong, there are stories that have made faith work, but it takes supporting writing around the idea to make that work. Also, John's intuition said he was guilty. Why am I to believe Superman's intuition over John's? Back to the trial, Kilowog gives his testament, but the prosecutor points out how pointless his statement is. And because Kilowog isn't a lawyer, he can't make a decent argument against that. It pains me how pointless Kilowog himself actually is here. He's more of a segue to the Guardians making an entrance than actually being relevant. Back on the moon, Jean and Superman find a hologram device. Before they can warn anyone, though, they're attacked by Kanjaro. Hawkgirl comes to rescue them. Well, they weren't really in any danger in the first place, but I guess she gets points for trying? Starting to feel more and more like the writers just wanted Hawkgirl to be in this episode because her relationship with Green Lantern will grow later, but they really didn't have anything for her to do, so she's shoehorned into everything else. It is finally revealed that the Manhunters are the ones actually behind this. Yeah. While I can forgive certain elements being easy to predict, I think this took it too far. Even kids would have an easy time predicting this. This is for kids can be a reason, but it's not an excuse. Anyway, despite the testimony of the Guardians, and because Flash is a horrible, and I do mean horrible lawyer, John is found guilty in order to be executed.
This isn't right. We can't just sit here.
We have to. Think of the others like us. We all need to be held accountable. We have too much power not to be.
If only this were the actual lesson of the episode. Before the execution is finished, however, Superman and Jean burst in and reveal that it was all a frame-up. When the Guardians discover that the Manhunters are the ones to blame, they realize that they're going back to Oa. Some exposition is delivered here about the creation of the Manhunters and how they don't like the current job they have. I find this to be very sloppy exposition. Part 1 gave one foreshadowing, which I felt wasn't done well. A little more time could have been dedicated to the Guardians and their relationship with the Manhunters, or just show how bad the Manhunters had it in general. It didn't have to be, and actually shouldn't be, obvious like this moment was. It just needed to be more abundant. The League makes their way to Oa and... What is this? What is this? Oa is supposed to be like Coruscant. It's supposed to be one giant city with buildings that are fit for kings. And why are they using turrets? This is the home of the freaking Green Lantern Corps. It's at this point that I realize that the Green Lantern Corps, at least in this episode, is a very downscaled version of its comic counterpart. I don't see the point of that, and I know the show is going to change its mind later, so this is indeed something I hold against this episode. This is also where I notice how direct the fighting animation is. The main thing these fights like to focus on is impact. It's all about how hard something is hitting something else. I noticed it here and not the previous episode because of all the Green Lanterns. Any type of media Green Lantern related is generally not about the impact, but how the impact is made. One thing Green Lanterns need to know how to be is creative. In this show, John rarely gets creative with his ring and resorts to basic beams and shields. I don't think a focus on impact and a lack of focus on creativity is an inherently good nor bad thing. Justice League uses its focus on impact to its advantage, so I say it works for them. But if you're a Green Lantern fan like me, you can see how this type of style doesn't work with how he would normally fight. We see that as the Manhunters continue to bombard Oa, the Guardians lose power. This is where I start to question the overall plot. The Manhunters' plan was to frame John to get the Guardians off of Oa and away from the central battery. However, this plan was not guaranteed to work as the Guardians weren't sure they'd even be willing to go. Even if it did work, it's clearly shown that not all the Guardians left. John's trial really did not do much to help the Manhunters' plans. Anyway, John tries to stop the Manhunters, but for reasons I really just do not understand, he is overpowered. The Manhunter leader absorbs the power of the central battery, taking it away from every Lantern and every Guardian. This leads to one of my all-time favorite moments in the entire show.
In brightest day, in blackest night, no evil shall escape my sight. Let those who worship evil's might beware my power, Green Lantern's light.
As much as I love this part, it's anticlimactic. If John, or any Lantern, could just absorb the Manhunter leader after he became the power, then there were really no stakes to this whole conflict. So it's the aftermath, and John's Green Lantern friends apologize for not having his back. He then thanks his League friends for not giving up on him, and the episode ends.
Let's go home.
And everyone forgot about the jet back on the other planet. So what's the lesson here?
You believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself.
Hey, what are friends for?
I guess we were wrong about you, John. We should have known better.
Yeah, you should have.
And here we have yet another problem with this episode. The episode's lesson seems to be that you should never give up on yourself nor your friends. The problem is how John is portrayed. He gave up on himself, he gave up on his friends helping him, and then has the gall to turn around and try to make his other friends feel guilty for doing the same thing. There's a saying, hypocrisy does not make you wrong. To which I respond with, no, it makes you a hypocrite. There are some traits we like to see on heroes like courage, determination, and perseverance. There are some traits we like to see on villains like deception, intelligence, and motivation. I've yet to find a situation where hypocrisy is appealing. It doesn't matter how right or wrong the character is. If they're a hypocrite, they have a very unlikable trait. I mentioned the comics a lot in this review. That's partially because the episode is based off of a very iconic comic titled Comic Odyssey, and I think that comic did this plot much better. In the comic, John and Martian Manhunter are searching for a villain. John doesn't take his opponent seriously, and he sends John away because he thinks his partner can't handle the situation, insisting he won't need any help. This is a time where John was arrogant, and it's this arrogance that causes the problem that's about to occur. When John gets to his foe, the man is prepared. If John hadn't underestimated his opponent and hadn't downplayed John's importance, he could have saved the planet he was on. This is something John should undeniably feel guilty for, as it's not a guy doing his job and things just happen to go wrong, but pride coming before a fall. The comic goes into detail of how the people on the planet not only die, but have an agonizing death, portraying that there is no way this can be seen as something to brush off. And when the Martian comes back, he has absolutely no pity for the Green Lantern, and I mean none. John feels guilty and believes that it's too much to live with. He's on the verge of ending everything for himself. Then Jean appears and tells him this: "Are you going to kill yourself or not? You might as well. It's painfully apparent that you're not suited for this line of work. This profession is a tough and unforgiving calling, demanding strength and character. Our kind are called upon to make crucial decisions daily and act upon them. We also have to be able to live with the consequences of our actions and to learn from our mistakes. This is probably one of the most important and poignant lessons I've seen in a comic. So it's a little upsetting of how wrong they get it in the cartoon. The way the comic teaches the lesson might be a little too heavy for kids at home who are watching, but I still think it's an overall better lesson to teach them than what we were given in this episode. I can learn from a failure who made a mistake. I can't learn from a hypocrite who's willing to judge others for the same thing he did. But what do you guys think? Do you agree with my critiques or not? If so, how do you think this episode could have been fixed? Post in the comments and let me know. So yeah, despite this being one of my favorites as a kid, as an adult, I see a lot of problems with this episode. It's not faithful to the source material, the fights feel like padding, it uses illogical reasoning to advance the plot, and the execution of the lesson is just overall flawed. This has been Shady Doorags. So long, farewell, I'd be to say goodbye.